This next set of speakers is going to be a pair. I've just learned about this organization that they have. They've started a group called Texans for Thoughtful Politics, and this is something that is so in line with Forward Party. So imagine, I got some material hung on my door handle from my Republican precinct chair that was like, here's who you vote for. Here's this Republican candidate, right? So you get that kind of information. You probably get it from the Democrats, depending on where you live. But imagine that somebody was out there doing that for who is common ground based, who is a sensible candidate, not who's one side or the other, but how can you inform your local folks on who's actually approaching this in a sensible way. That's what these two individuals are doing. I'd like to introduce to you Shannon Fone, am I saying that right? Shannon Fawn, and Holly Bohart from Texans for Thoughtful Politics.
Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Shannon Fawn.
And I'm Holly Bohart.
And we are the co-founders of Texans for Thoughtful Politics. We are two Texas moms that in 2016, despite each having 2 kids and a full-time job as a lawyer, we decided that we had to do something to improve the state of politics. I had been raised in a conservative household in rural South Texas and had worked in the Texas Senate for what we would now call moderate Republicans. I had also worked during a summer in DC for a Blue Dog Democrat. As the Republican Tea Party movement got going and the party started quickly shifting right, I started feeling very out of place. I would sometimes still vote in the Republican primary, but that was only to prevent the extreme candidates in statewide races from winning the primary and thus the office. I really started identifying much more with moderate Democrats as the right got more and more conservative. In 2016, I never thought the people I grew up with in rural Texas would vote for a man like Donald Trump.
And I too was raised in a conservative household. My mother was a food writer for a local newspaper, and my father was a Lutheran minister. So as you might imagine, attending church and Sunday school and vacation Bible school were always very normal and consistent activities in my childhood. In hindsight, Christianity in general was a very large part of my childhood. I recall many lessons that I learned as a child from my parents, right versus wrong, the power of words, what you say does have an impact, but also the attributes of the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Politically, my parents were Republicans, although I should say it was really my mother who was a Republican. My father was an independent, but my mom had the uncanny ability to get my father to pretty much vote as a Republican. So, and in my early 20s, I too voted as a Republican, and I, like Shannon, had interned with my U.S. congressman. However, after the war in Iraq and the failure to identify weapons of mass destruction, I grew wary of some of the talking points of the Republican Party. And in 2016, when my mother and father voted for Trump, I was truly dumbfounded. Their support of Trump seemed incongruous with all of the lessons from my childhood and those foundational beliefs. And I really struggled to understand, why would they vote for Trump? So Shannon and I decided to meet up shortly after the 2016 election to process what had happened. How did we get to a place where Donald Trump was the best person our country could elect as president? Was it the party system? Was it the structure of primaries? Was it gerrymandering? Was it the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United? We had a lot of questions that we were struggling with, and to a large extent, the answer to those questions were all yes. But we felt like there was more to the story. We knew that some of our friends and family would vote for Trump, but at that point in history, no one seemed excited to vote for Trump. It seemed like everyone felt like he was the lesser of two evils. We genuinely wanted to understand how our nation had arrived at this point. We also wondered, when did identifying as a moderate or compromising with the other political party become such a bad thing? So I appreciate, Mr. Taggart, a lot of your comments, because we are in search of the moderate.
So what we settled on, what felt most relevant to us and actionable, was that not enough people were voting in primaries. And when they do, they may not be completely knowledgeable about the candidates they're voting for. In 2016, only 28% of eligible voters voted in the primary election that year. And that was pretty high compared to historical numbers. That meant that 72% of eligible voters had no say in who ended up on the ballot in November. 28% of voters got to decide who our options were in November. And many primary voters seemed to either lean way too far left or way too far right. So we decided to focus on two things: encouraging more people to vote in the primary elections and educating voters on their choices. So Holly and I recognized that we were only two people, but adding in friends, family, neighbors, and asking each of our members to try to reach out to at least 10 people, our group started getting a lot larger. We were searching to do something tangible to solve the issues, hoping that our efforts, while small at first, could grow into something larger and more impactful. So we started having meetings with like-minded people who were worried about the state of politics. We would gather to discuss several things. We would talk about federal, state, and local policies. We would talk about the types of candidates we wanted. We wanted people who focused on the bread and butter issues, who were pragmatic, who worked across the aisle, who talked in civil and responsible ways, who would be good role models for our kids. We wanted statesmen and leaders. We wanted them to be moral and competent and serve their constituency rather than wealthy donors or large corporations. We also talked about the kind of candidates we didn't want. We don't want extreme people, whether left or right. We don't want somebody looking to divide, someone who enjoys the powers and benefits of politics, but we're not engaged in the genuine work of serving their constituencies. And we also talked about what we could do to support quality candidates. So we started gathering more and more email addresses for people who were interested in what we were doing. We wanted better politics, and a lot of other people did too.
So as we approached the 2018 election, it was apparent that one thing that people felt that they needed in order to be ready to vote was good information about the candidates. And we recognized how hard it was to prepare for voting. As attorneys, we even felt uninformed when we were asked to vote for judges. And if attorneys struggle with what judges to vote for, how do non-attorneys make choices? How does the average busy American have time to do all the research that is necessary to feel confident in identifying quality candidates? Frankly, it was hard to find good candidates in 2018, and we feel like it's getting even harder today. So just to kind of talk a little bit about our process, we knew about the League of Women Voter Guides and all the work they do, and I think they're here today, and we applaud those efforts. And we were also aware of the candidate write-ups in local papers. And again, all of that is great work, but it still didn't help us find the leaders and the statesmen and women that we were looking for. We felt like at times extreme candidates were able to kind of be vague in answers so that their kind of extreme views and actions did not show up in those write-ups. And then also, unfortunately, there are many candidates who refuse to answer those questions at all. So you're left with kind of a dearth of information. So we realized the only way to separate out extreme candidates from the kind of candidates that we were looking for was to do our own research. And again, this comes from two attorneys who can be very detail-oriented. So we asked for volunteers from our group, and as a team, we have been producing high-quality research on as many races as we can for relevant state, federal, and some Austin area offices. At first, the focus really was on the primaries. We wanted better candidates to make it out of the primaries so that you had a quality candidate to vote for in November. And again, we were focused on the more moderate and competent candidates in the Democratic primary races, and the same went for the Republican primary races. And we would start with looking at the candidates' own words. We'd delve into their website, their speeches, their mailers. We would watch any debates that were available. Then we would look at who was endorsing the candidates. What were those groups about? If a candidate talked about bringing the country together, if they were focused on education, the economy, and respect for individual rights, they were probably our kind of candidate. But if they talked about the culture wars of the day or were endorsed by extreme groups, they probably were not our kind of candidate.
So we started producing summaries of each candidate's background, their experience, and our view of their competency and their adherence to our standards. And we would give a clear recommendation on who is the more moderate candidate in the election and who is the more extreme candidate. And we would explain our reasons for those identifiers so that voters can analyze whether our work was good and whether they agreed with our analysis. People loved our in-depth research during the primaries and asked us for guides in the general election. Well, that's a much harder task when you're asked to pick who's the more moderate between a Republican and a Democrat. But we've done our best to stick to our standards in making those choices. When we don't have moderate candidates to choose from, because sometimes we don't, sometimes we have to choose the candidate who will serve the greater goal of moderation by, for example, swinging one house into the hands of the party not in control of the competing house, just to have that balance of power. Or choosing a Democratic candidate for president when we knew the House and Senate would be controlled by Republicans, or vice versa. We need moderation and reasonableness, and we will be very strategic about how we get it. We've been meeting since 2016 and producing voting guides since 2018, but we've also hosted candidate events at our homes and have encouraged members to give money to moderate candidates or candidates running in particularly strategic races. We've operated all of these years off of emails pasted in a Word document and a bunch of people committing to do a lot of research. Just last year, we finally landed on a name and a mission statement. So we are Texans for Thoughtful Politics, and this is our mission. Texans for Thoughtful Politics aims to help both Democrats and Republicans find the more thoughtful, competent, reasonable, and moderate political candidates who aim to be true public servants to all Texans and Americans, and who are committed to solving the real problems facing our state and country while prioritizing democratic values, the rule of law, and civil, responsible political dialogue. We want candidates who unite this country through hope, opportunity, and common ground, rather than serve their own interests by sowing fear and division.
It's important to note that no one pays anything for what Texans for Thoughtful Politics does, and we'll concede that our group could be much more technologically advanced. Our group is really at a crossroads of deciding how we move forward, and we see that as an exciting opportunity. We welcome any suggestions you have and would love to talk to folks at lunch, or feel free to reach out to us in the future. Our email address is texansforthoughtfulpolitics@gmail.com. But we want to thank each and all of you for everything that you do to bring us more thoughtful politics. Thank you.
That was incredible. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was great. Wow, that is so exciting. That's incredible. And that's such a great example of, I had a similar thought as I'm thinking about how to build Collin County and how to go about that. And I'm thinking, why isn't there something we can do to help people understand which candidate is the more in line with what we have doing? It's that someone is working on that. We just have to find them and connect with them. So that is just so exciting that y'all have been doing that. It reminds me of something a music professor once said about musical artists who get really big. He said anytime you see somebody who feels like an overnight success, that overnight was over the past 10 years. So it feels like that's what y'all have just hit on, is that you've been building this for a 10-year period, and now it's here it is. So however we can help you expand that, I mean, we're all in on that. That's incredible. So great job.